My name is Jenna. I'm 17 years old, and I used to believe that birthdays were meant to be special, a day when you'd feel seen, loved, and celebrated. That belief shattered the night my parents blindfolded me, drove for miles, and left me in front of a rotting barn. "You thought we'd actually celebrate you?" My mother laughed cruelly, while my father sneered, "You're just a spoiled brat." And then they left. No hesitation. No looking back. What they didn't know was that their cruelty wouldn't destroy me. It would ignite something far more powerful. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to comment where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned the darkest night of my life into the beginning of a life worth living. Growing up in the Anderson household meant living in a mansion full of expensive silence. We had everything money could buy: marble countertops, a manicured lawn, and 5 immaculate bedrooms. But none of it mattered. What we lacked was warmth. What we lacked was love. My parents, Kimberly and Howard, built their reputations in corporate law and real estate, obsessed with control and appearances. To the outside world, they were powerhouses. But inside our home, they were distant strangers playing the role of parents because it looked good, not because they felt anything. Birthdays in our home were never a cause for celebration. When I turned 8, I invited classmates to a party my mother said she'd planned. But when I got home from school that day, the house was empty. On the kitchen counter sat a sad little grocery store cake. My father came home well after 9 p.m., muttering about an important client. My mother strolled in later, arms full of shopping bags, but none of them were for me. "Birthdays are just another day, Jenna," she told me when I asked why. "The sooner you learn that, the better." By the time I turned 12, I had stopped expecting anything. That year, my father tossed a $50 bill on the kitchen counter and didn't even look at me. "Buy yourself something," he said like it was a burden. My mother didn't say a single word. She later claimed she was swamped with charity work. That night, I sat in my room with store-bought cupcakes and streamed movies on my laptop. No party, no hugs, no cake cutting, just the kind of loneliness that seeps into your bones. It became a pattern. Every year, silence, indifference, and disappointment. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered on my birthday was Bailey, my best friend. She never forgot. Every year, she showed up with something meaningful. A book by my favorite author, a new sketchbook, or something handmade and full of love. Still, some naive part of me always hoped things would change, that maybe my parents would one day see me. Maybe this year would be different. 2 weeks before my 17th birthday, I casually mentioned to my mom that Lorenzo's, the little Italian restaurant downtown, had a seasonal special I'd love to try. She didn't even look up from her tablet. My father didn't react at all. Tensions had been running high in the house. College was coming up, and I had dreams of studying art history and studio art at a small liberal arts college. But my parents had already written my future for me, law school, just like my dad. "Art doesn't pay bills," he scoffed over dinner one night. "We didn't raise you to waste your life drawing pictures." "It's not just drawing," I tried to explain. "It's curation, restoration, education. The program." But my mother cut me off with a laugh. 4 years of college to end up teaching? What a brilliant use of money. That was always the pattern. I'd try to explain myself. They'd shut me down. And then I'd retreat to my room, close the door, and disappear behind my headphones. The morning of my birthday came like every other, quiet and cold. My mom had already left for an early meeting. My dad was at the kitchen counter, eyes glued to his phone. I waited in the doorway for a second, just hoping for a happy birthday. But all he said was, "There's no time to drive you. Take the bus." No greeting, no smile, nothing. I grabbed an apple and walked to school. The day passed in a haze. A few teachers offered hollow birthday wishes. They'd seen the date on their rosters, but nothing felt real. And then, around lunchtime, Bailey texted me. "Emergency. Grandma's in the hospital. I'm so sorry. I can't come today. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Happy birthday, Red Heart." I told her not to worry, that it was okay. But walking home that afternoon felt heavier than usual. I was truly alone. No celebration. No love. Just another reminder that I didn't matter to the people who were supposed to care the most. When I got home, the house was strangely quiet. Usually, I'd hear my mother barking instructions on work calls or faking charm with her socialite friends. But there was nothing. Then I saw it. A note, propped against the fruit bowl. Be ready at 7. Wear something nice. We have plans.
Mom.
I read it 3 times. Plans? On my birthday? It didn't make sense. After 17 years of silence, this sudden shift felt suspicious, but I couldn't help it. A tiny spark of hope lit up inside me. At 7 p.m., I walked downstairs in a navy blue dress, one my mother had once called presentable. I even did my hair and makeup against my better judgment. I hated myself for trying so hard, for still hoping they'd finally see me. Both my parents were waiting in the foyer, my father in a blazer, my mother in a sleek cream pantsuit. You look nice, she said, smiling, actually smiling. Right on time. My father nodded. Very appropriate. Then, the biggest shock of all, he placed a hand on my shoulder. We've got something special planned, he said warmly. A birthday surprise. Every rational part of me screamed that something wasn't right. But that small, foolish part of me, the part that had been blowing out invisible candles every year, wanted so badly to believe. So I asked, "Where are we going?" My mom reached into her purse and pulled out a black silk blindfold. "That's the surprise part," she said. "You'll need to wear this." I froze. A blindfold? Is that really necessary? Don't you trust us? My dad asked, his tone turning sharper. It's a surprise, Jenna. Play along. I didn't want to, but I did. I let them tie the blindfold around my eyes. And as darkness wrapped around me, I climbed into the back seat of the car, with no idea that I was headed toward the most devastating betrayal of my life. Alexandra returned from the other room, her face calm but purposeful. She handed me a slip of paper with her address neatly written across it. I read it aloud to Bailey over the phone. "We'll be there in under an hour," she promised. True to her word, 45 minutes later, Bailey arrived in her family's SUV, her father Frank behind the wheel, and her mother Janet in the passenger seat. The moment Bailey saw me standing on the porch, she rushed forward and wrapped me in a tight, trembling hug. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The dam I'd been holding back all night broke open, and I sobbed into her shoulder while she whispered, "You're safe now. I've got you. You're not alone." Frank's voice cut through the quiet. "I've already called the police," he said firmly. "This isn't discipline. This isn't parenting. This is abandonment." "No, please," I whispered weakly. "I don't want to make things worse." Janet walked up and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, you're not making things worse. What your parents did to you is illegal. What we're doing is making sure you're safe. That's what matters." Less than 20 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled into Alexandra's driveway. A tall, kind-eyed officer stepped out and introduced himself as Officer Dominic Carter. His voice was calm, measured, and patient as he took me inside and began to ask questions. He recorded everything. I told him about the blindfold, the long drive, the barn. Every word, every detail. He listened without judgment. Just quiet professionalism that made me feel seen in a way I never had before. "We'll need to take you to the station," he explained once I finished. "We'll formalize your statement there and contact your parents." "Can I go with her?" Bailey asked without hesitation, still holding my hand. Officer Carter nodded. Family friend support is allowed, especially for minors in trauma cases. The station wasn't anything like what I'd imagined from TV. No flashing lights or shouting matches, just quiet rooms and plain walls. The interview space was simple: a table, chairs, a recording device. A woman named Patricia from Child Protective Services joined us. She was gentle and warm and explained that her job was to advocate for me, to make sure I was protected and my voice was heard. I had just finished repeating my statement when I heard a voice echoing from the front desk. "Where is she? Where is my daughter? We've been searching everywhere." My mother. Officer Carter stood, and quietly excused himself to handle it. I peeked through the partially open blinds and saw my parents at the front counter. My mother was crying loudly, putting on a grand show of maternal panic. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable, already wearing his practiced courtroom face. "They're lying," I whispered. "They said they'd come back for me this morning, but they weren't looking. They never were." Patricia's face grew hard. "Let them lie. We're documenting everything, and the truth has a way of finding its way through." Eventually, my parents were separated and placed in different rooms. But before she was led away, my mother looked through the glass and locked eyes with me. In that single moment, the mask slipped. Her expression twisted, not with concern, but with cold fury. Then, just as quickly, she forced the performance back on. Officer Carter returned. "They're claiming you ran away," he said. "They say they took you to a historic property as a birthday surprise. You got upset during an argument about college and ran off." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, bitter, breathless laugh. "They think I ran away to an abandoned barn," I said. "With no phone, no money, in a dress and heels? Really? It's not a very convincing story." Officer Carter replied neutrally, but his expression said he believed me. "Unless we have solid evidence, though, it's still your word against theirs." And then it hit me, a spark of hope. "My phone," I said suddenly. I turned on the voice memo app during the drive. I was scared. I had this habit of recording voice notes for song ideas. I just felt something was off. It might have caught everything. Bailey immediately pulled out her phone. "Angela," she said, "your mom's assistant. She has a key to your house, right?" 10 minutes later, she had Angela on the line. We explained the situation, and without hesitation, Angela agreed to retrieve my phone and bring it to the station. She arrived within the hour, looking confused and worried, but said nothing as she handed over my bag. Officer Carter took the phone and assured me they'd have tech review it for admissible evidence. The wait was agony. Bailey and her parents stayed with me the whole time. They wouldn't leave. Patricia brought sandwiches and juice, trying to create some sense of normalcy in a situation that was anything but. Finally, Officer Carter returned, this time with Sergeant Maria Lopez. The expression on her face told me everything. "We've reviewed the recording," she said calmly. "It supports your version of events. Your parents clearly planned the drive, the blindfold, the abandonment. We're now escalating the case and proceeding with charges." I nodded, but my hands were shaking. "What happens now? I mean, what happens to them? What happens to me?" Patricia stepped in. "You're 17, so legally it's a bit complicated. You're not an adult yet, but you're old enough to have a say. Do you have any relatives who might be willing to take custody?" I thought for a moment, and only one name surfaced. My aunt, Amelia, my dad's sister. I haven't seen her in years, but I remember she was kind to me. They had a falling out years ago, but she never treated me like they did. "We'll try to reach her," Patricia assured me. "In the meantime, we'll need emergency foster placement. She can stay with us," Janet said immediately. "We have the space, and she already feels like family." The rest of the day passed in a fog of signatures, phone calls, and paperwork. My parents were detained pending arraignment. I was officially placed with Bailey's family under emergency foster care until the court could make a longer-term decision. As we finally left the station that evening, every ounce of adrenaline drained from my body. I sat in the back seat of Bailey's family car, watching the town roll by in twilight. The buildings, the streets, the trees, all looked the same. But nothing was the same. In 24 hours, everything had changed. My birthday, the one day I'd once begged to be special, had become the line between who I was and who I was becoming. Not a daughter, hoping for love, but a survivor finally learning what love really means. The days after the barn incident unfolded like a blur. Fast, overwhelming, and full of things I had never imagined would happen to me. My parents were officially charged with child endangerment, reckless abandonment, and emotional abuse. Their arraignment felt surreal. Watching the people who had controlled my life for so long now sitting behind a courtroom table, dressed like professionals but no longer untouchable. It was like watching strangers in costumes pretending to be my parents. They were granted bail, but with strict conditions: no contact with me, passports surrendered, weekly check-ins with court officers. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judith Ryan, made her disgust crystal clear. The deliberate nature of this act, particularly timed with your daughter's birthday, demonstrates not just negligence, but cruelty, she said. This court will not minimize the severity of what was done. While the legal system slowly moved forward, I began settling into life with Bailey and her family, the Wellingtons. Their house felt like stepping into another universe. There were warm dinners, jokes around the table, casual hugs, eye contact. It was a kind of emotional climate I'd only read about in books. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Every time Janet asked how I was feeling, or Frank asked if I wanted a ride somewhere, I flinched, waiting for the guilt trip, the passive-aggressive sigh, the cold silence. But it never came. It was like discovering I had been colorblind my whole life, and now I could finally see in full color. Meanwhile, media attention exploded. News headlines popped up everywhere. Prominent attorney and real estate agent charged with abandoning teenage daughter. Birthday betrayal. Teen left in barn. Parents face felony charges. My school counselor, Mr. Travis Bennett, arranged for me to finish coursework from home while things died down. He checked in twice a week, bringing assignments, snacks, and a calming presence. "You're showing incredible strength," he told me once. "But remember, it's okay not to be okay." 2 weeks after everything changed, my Aunt Amelia arrived. She flew in from Arizona, where she'd built a quiet life as a landscape architect. I hadn't seen her in years, but the second she walked into the Wellingtons' living room, I recognized her warmth. She looked so much like my father, but everything about her energy was different. Where he was rigid, she was soft. Where he was controlling, she was grounded. She pulled me into a long, trembling hug. "I should have stayed in touch," she whispered. "I always suspected things weren't right, but I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Jenna." She applied for temporary guardianship the next day. Her husband Carlos and their kids, my cousins, even sent video messages welcoming me if I chose to live with them. "There's no pressure," Amelia told me. "If you want to stay here with Bailey until graduation, that's okay. If you want a fresh start, we'll be here with open arms. The choice is yours." That sentence hit harder than she probably realized. The choice is yours. In my parents' house, choices were punishable. Now I had one. As the case moved forward, I started trauma counseling with a therapist named Dr. Eleanor Fisher. Her office smelled like lavender and sunlight, and for the first few sessions, I barely spoke. I just cried, and she let me. She never pushed, just waited, until one day, I finally said, "I always thought it was my fault, that if I was just easier to love, none of this would have happened." She leaned forward and said, "Jenna, what they did was not about you being hard to love. It was about them being unable to love properly. That's not your failure. That's theirs." Over time, I began to see the full picture. The emotional abuse hadn't started at the barn. It had been there all along. The cold silences, the dismissals, the way my needs were treated like inconveniences. I had called it normal because I didn't know any better. But now I did. Unexpected allies began showing up. Mrs. Martinez, my English teacher, submitted my poetry portfolio to a National Arts Foundation, and I won a scholarship. One of my dad's former colleagues sent a legal statement revealing he'd once left the firm because he couldn't stomach the way my father spoke about me behind closed doors. Even the neighbors, who had once smiled politely from a distance, stepped in. Dinners were dropped off. Gift cards delivered. One day, Mrs. Patel, the head of the neighborhood association, arrived on the Wellingtons' porch and said, "We always felt something was off in that house. We should have said something sooner. I'm sorry we didn't." By the end of the semester, I made my decision. I would move to Tucson and live with Amelia's family. I needed space. I needed distance. Bailey cried when I told her, but not because she wanted to stop me. "You deserve a clean slate," she said, squeezing my hand. "And don't worry, you're stuck with me for life." In June, just after my final exam, my parents accepted a plea deal. The evidence, especially the audio recording, was too strong. Their deal included probation, mandatory therapy, community service, and a permanent stain on their professional records. The final hearing was short, but powerful. Judge Ryan looked directly at them and said, "You didn't just fail as parents. You failed as people. This court can't sentence you into being better humans, but it can ensure you no longer have power over your daughter." Before she ended, I was given the chance to make a statement. I stepped to the podium, looked my parents in the eyes, and said, "What happened on my birthday wasn't a one-time event. It was the final blow in a lifetime of emotional starvation. I spent years trying to earn your love, thinking that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, got better grades, you'd finally notice me. Now, I understand. You couldn't love me the way I deserved, not because I wasn't lovable, but because you never learned how. So, I'm not standing here for revenge. I'm standing here to reclaim the voice you spent years trying to silence. I am not your failure. I am my own beginning." Afterward, we walked out of the courtroom into a crowd of reporters. Amelia guided me past them with her arm firmly around my shoulder. That night, we packed my things. Not everything, just what I wanted to bring. Bailey and Janet handled the rest, sparing me the pain of returning to that cold house. The next morning, we flew to Arizona. It was the first day of my new life. Moving in with Aunt Amelia's family in Tucson felt like stepping into a different version of reality. One where love wasn't earned, but simply given. Where my opinions were valued, not mocked. Where disagreements didn't erupt into icy silences or cruel punishments, but ended in conversation and hugs. Amelia's husband, Carlos, was a quiet man with steady eyes and warm hands. He treated me like I'd always belonged, never once making me feel like a burden. My cousins, Sophia and Miguel, sent me welcome videos, eager to meet me. For the first time in my life, I felt wanted, not because of what I could achieve, but because of who I was. That summer, Amelia and I began a ritual. Every Sunday evening, we'd cook dinner together while music played softly in the background. Her way of making me feel at home. One night, I dropped a plate by accident. It shattered across the tile. Instinctively, I froze, bracing for scolding or sarcastic comments. Instead, Amelia chuckled and handed me a broom. "It's just a plate, Jenna. Families mess up. We clean it up. We move on. Mistakes don't define you here." That one sentence cracked something open in me. In the fall, I enrolled in college, double majoring in psychology and studio art. It felt right. Psychology helped me understand the damage I'd endured and how to rebuild from it. Art gave me a voice when words weren't enough. For my senior thesis, I created a large-scale installation called Silent Spaces. It combined journal entries, self-portraits, and audio clips exploring emotional neglect, abandonment, and resilience. When it opened at a local gallery, dozens of people walked through and cried. They weren't just looking at my story, they were seeing parts of their own. Healing wasn't a straight path. Some nights, a smell or a sound would send me spiraling back to the barn. The creak of old wood, the smell of dry hay, the feeling of being unseen. Dr. Larson, my therapist in Tucson, helped me through those moments. "Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel it again," she told me. "It means you'll know what to do when it returns." That guidance saved me more than once. During my sophomore year, I started a peer support group for students who had experienced family trauma or estrangement. What began as a few people meeting for coffee turned into a recognized campus organization with weekly meetings, guest speakers, and a hotline. We called it the Second Family. Because sometimes your real family isn't where you came from, it's the one you build. Bailey remained my anchor. We talked every week, sent letters, visited during breaks. On my 19th birthday, she surprised me by showing up at Amelia's door with cupcakes and a sketchbook covered in our inside jokes. "You didn't think I'd miss another birthday, did you?" She smiled. That year, my mother requested a meeting through official legal channels. She had been attending therapy fulfilling court-mandated requirements, but had now enrolled in additional sessions voluntarily. I debated for weeks. Did I owe her my time? My forgiveness? Eventually, with Dr. Larson's help and a lot of boundaries in place, I agreed to meet. We sat in a quiet cafe. Bailey came with me. My mother looked smaller, less polished, more tired. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice stripped of the old condescension. "Why now?" I asked. She looked down. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not pretending I did everything right. Therapy forced me to look at myself, at how I was parented, at how I passed down damage instead of breaking the cycle. I know this doesn't change what I did. I just needed to say, I'm sorry. For all of it." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just listened. And when she was done, I said, "Thank you, but I'm not ready to forgive you. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I appreciate that you didn't come here asking for it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "That's fair." As we parted, she handed me an envelope. "From your father," she said. He didn't feel he had the right to ask for a meeting himself. Inside was a check, my share of my grandmother's inheritance. Along with it, a handwritten letter, unlike anything I'd ever received from him. He didn't excuse what they did. He didn't blame me. He just admitted that they'd failed, that he'd spent his life hiding from pain and taking it out on everyone else, that my strength had shaken something loose in him, that he hoped I'd build a better life than he ever knew how to give me. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready, but I kept the letter, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a record of truth. Proof that I hadn't imagined the damage or the courage it took to break free from it. By the time I turned 22, I barely recognized the girl who once stood outside that barn with nothing but a dress and a whistle. That girl was scared, lonely, still hoping someone might come back to save her. But no one came. So she saved herself. My 22nd birthday felt nothing like the others. There was no blindfold, no cruel surprise, no cold silence disguised as discipline. This time, there was laughter, music, home-cooked food, string lights draped across Aunt Amelia's backyard, casting a soft golden glow on the faces of people who truly loved me. Bailey flew in, of course. She showed up with a lopsided cake that said, "You did it, Jenna," in bright pink frosting, and immediately hugged me so hard I nearly dropped the bowl of chips in my hands. Amelia grilled her famous rosemary chicken. Carlos set up a little speaker and played my favorite playlist. My cousins handed me handmade cards and a goofy drawing of me in a superhero cape that read, "Barn Girl No More." We didn't toast to survival. We toasted to growth, to found family, to choosing joy, even after pain tried to steal it. It wasn't some dramatic, picture-perfect event, but it was exactly what I needed. At one point, as the sky darkened and the candles on my cake flickered, I looked around and felt something I hadn't even known how to name all those years ago. Safety. Not the kind you feel behind locked doors or under expensive roofs, but the kind that comes from being seen, believed, loved without conditions. When the last guests had left and the lights had been turned off, I sat in Amelia's garden swing, watching the stars. Bailey joined me, wrapping a blanket around our shoulders. "You know," she said softly, "I still think about that night. The barn. What would have happened if Alexandra hadn't found you? If you hadn't called me?" "I think about it too," I admitted, "but not the same way I used to." "How so?" "I used to replay it and wonder what I did wrong, why they hated me so much. But now I see it differently. That night was horrifying, but it was also the start of everything real in my life." "You became your own rescue," Bailey whispered. "I did," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. 5 years ago, I was abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Now, I'm surrounded by people who love me because they've seen who I am and love me all the more for it. Today, I'm pursuing my master's degree in counseling psychology, specializing in family trauma. I've spoken at conferences, mentored students, and helped others build new lives after surviving the unimaginable. I turned pain into purpose, not because I was stronger than most, but because I was finally given a chance to see that love doesn't hurt, that family doesn't abandon you, and that survival is only the beginning. To anyone listening who's still in the thick of it, feeling invisible, unwanted, or broken beyond repair, I want to tell you something. You are not too damaged to heal. You are not hard to love. And you are not alone. Your pain is real, but so is your future. And it can be bright, unimaginably bright, if you dare to believe that healing is possible. My name is Jenna, and while my story began in a place of betrayal, it didn't end there. It began in a barn, but it bloomed in a garden, surrounded by love I chose, and that chose me back. If you've ever experienced something like this, or if someone you love has, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Let's build a space where healing is loud and hope is louder. And if this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for walking through this journey with me, because sometimes surviving isn't the end of the story. It's the start of becoming who you were always meant to be.